And I just sort of preface this as well by saying that I am like the least likely person to have become a love coach, because I was a nightmare in relationships for such a long time, all my life really. My parents might have done their healing, but I hadn't, and I had to deal with the effects it had on me. I wanted to have the boyfriend who looked good and it all looked good, but they weren't the right fit for me. No one would choose it. No one would choose heartbreak, but I am here today because of heartbreak. I'm really proud of myself, how I navigated. When I think about where I was in my early 20s and I was so lost, I was literally, I'm surprised I didn't die. And that's how chaotic I was. Really, life is full of hard things, but they are the things that shape you. You could be up on top of the mountain with all this money and all this acclaim and all the accolades, but what the fuck is the point? Given the work I do, I felt like a failure again. I was like, here I go, so familiar to feel like a failure. So money's, because it's linked with, survival. There's a lot of shame and a lot of fear associated with money, and I think that's why the secrecy is there, because it's like, people get really afraid. People fall in love with each other through connection. Connection can only come from intimacy. Intimacy can only come from vulnerability and truth.
Welcome back to the Not Quite Pod. Today we've got Persia with us. Persia, do you just quickly want to introduce yourself and let everyone know a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Persia Lawson. I'm a dating and relationship coach and author, and I help women who identify as being high achievers, which is what I identify as myself, go from feeling really undervalued and not good in their love life to feeling good for a start, and to getting a healthy, exciting, meaningful relationship, whatever that might mean to them and whatever that might look like for them. I have a podcast that recently got rated top 3 in the UK for dating and relationships podcasts, and that's called Love is Coming. And my book has got the same name. My most recent book has got the same name, Love is Coming. I have a coaching program called Love for Leaders. I have various different programs. And I'm really passionate about what I call true power couple relationships, which is essentially just a relationship that has a positive impact on not just the couple, but on their loved ones, communities, and maybe even the world one day too. And I just sort of preface this as well by saying that I am the least likely person to have become a love coach, because I was a nightmare in relationships for such a long time, all my life really, up until my mid-20s when everything fell apart. I used to be an actor. And so I'm one of those people who sort of didn't choose this career, felt this career and this purpose, I guess, this life purpose chose me. But I feel very grateful and very happy to be here. And I also just want to say I am absolutely a student of this stuff as well. I'm not, I don't have it all figured out. I'm a love coach because I need this more than anyone, and it holds me accountable. So I'm not one of those sages from the stages, as Marie Forleo says. I'm definitely on the journey myself.
I love that. And also it's part of the reason why I also started this podcast. It was purely to learn from all different people from all different walks of life, because we all learn through different stages of our life. You're never a full expert, no matter how much reading you've done on it, how much experience you've got. You'd never know everything. Mm-hmm. I'm really intrigued by this. You mentioned earlier that you work with high achieving women. What would you, if I asked you to clarify that and classify that, what would you classify it as?
So this is interesting, because I work with women of on paper, they all do different things. So yes, I work with CEOs, I've worked with politicians, doctors, very successful influencers and actors and musicians. So, the type of jobs or entrepreneurs that have been applauded and celebrated in our culture as being successful. But actually I'm not really that bothered about what your job title is or what you do for a living. It's the high achieving thing. I know women who don't even have jobs. They might be stay-at-home mums, but they very much identify with this sort of type A perfectionist need to be perfect and do all the things. And so it's more than, it's not just what you do. It's more about how you meet life. And I've always been someone who was very, very, very driven and ambitious and worked hard, but, really struggled with perfectionism, extremely hard on myself. And it's the inner experience that I'm more interested in, because that is what ultimately caused me to be so dysfunctional in my love life, or it was a big part of it, because I was so focused on, different stages of my life. But, part of it was I wanted to have the boyfriend who looked good and it all looked good, but they weren't the right fit for me. I didn't really know who I was. I accepted really shitty treatment, or I was really awful to the good guys, because I didn't know how to accept love and being treated well. And so, it played out in all aspects of my relationship, my romantic relationships. But it was because romantic relationships are always a direct reflection of our relationship with ourselves. So because I never thought I was good enough, I was always striving to be better and better and just didn't accept myself. I was attracting in romantic dynamics that confirmed that I wasn't good enough. Whether it was me cheating and then I'm a piece of shit, or me being cheated on or ghosted. So it was always very extreme. And so the type of women that I work with today tend to struggle with the things I did. And the key three are feeling undervalued, so feeling disrespected, overlooked, attracting people who play hot and cold, like poor communication, all of those things. Unattracted in either that the people they attract, they don't really feel chemistry with, or they're just not really attracting anyone. And then the other one, which is interesting, is uninspired. Like, I found that I didn't struggle attracting people, guys, but I wasn't inspired by the types of connections. It didn't feel very meaningful. It felt very transactional, very superficial. And obviously the culture we live in today is very transactional. If you think about dating apps, which I think can be a good tool, but the way that we've been conditioned to use them, it's like you're swiping through a catalogue of humans. And there's something for me that's quite jarring. And so I think you can use dating apps, going on a tangent here, but it's around the energy and intention that we bring to using them, and also the people that we date. Like, I hear all the time, it's a numbers game. No, it's not. I can tell you, I have coached so many women who did the dating app thing and dates like there was no tomorrow. They were going on 5 dates a week and doing this for years, and they were still they didn't have the romantic experience they wanted. Whereas I've worked with clients who just didn't go on many dates, but they did the work on themselves, and then they attracted someone in the most random real life scenario. So it's ultimately it's an inside game. It's an inside job. And that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but there we are.
No, I love long-winded answers because it gives me a lot to work with. Really, also, it's quite something that's quite within me as well. As a disabled individual, I had zero success on dating apps because of I think sometimes the prejudices that people have that they don't realise they have, and then met my now long-term partner through a complete fluke of basically a friend talking about me at a job interview, and then 7 years later I'm with that person that they were chatting he was chatting to at that job interview.
Wow, I love that. See, it's so good to hear stories like that, because I hear them all the time from clients and people that I know, like real old school romance, synchronicities, magic. But the status quo, I get interviewed a lot in the media, and that so many people just think that that old school romance is dead, and it's just the way you have to do it. You have to do it via technology. No one meets in real life anymore. And I'm like, that's absolute bullshit. But if you believe that, then that's what you will experience, because our life, our experience of life is ultimately a byproduct of our beliefs and what we believe is possible and our expectations. And I really didn't want to believe that was true, but I absolutely, I've had enough life experience myself and seen it enough with clients to know that is true. And so we have to, again, it comes back to doing the inside work and to go you can change your beliefs. It takes time. It's a process, but you can change them. And I know when I look at the life I have today, given where it was, 15 years ago, it's like night and day, chalk and cheese. So it's absolutely possible. So it's really good to hear that. I love that.
And you've also got to be like really open to it and willing for it to come in, because I think as well, if you're automatically closed off to it, you're not going to be open. So as I say that when I met Gina and started chatting to Gina, it wasn't that I was looking for. I'd kind of given up on it. I was like, it don't matter, and it just kind of fell in my lap. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I'm here now. I might as well see where this goes. I mean, people on the podcast know as well. Me and Gina were long distance for 9 months. She's from Birmingham. I'm from London.
My husband's from Birmingham, and I'm from
it's there you go. It's all about just being open to different opportunities, and like you say as well, accepting yourself. And that's also a journey that I went on as a disabled man, going through that journey. And I wouldn't say I've completed it, but I've definitely got to a point where I'm fully comfortable with my disability. And everyone finds it really weird when I answer the question, would you hand your disability back? And I'm like, no, because I'd probably be really boring without it.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I've been asked a lot. You know, I had quite a crazy childhood. My parents struggled with addiction. And whilst I have no desire to go and relive it, I wouldn't change it, because it caused me a lot of pain. It caused people that I loved a lot of pain, because I, you know, lashed out and all sorts of things. But ultimately, the journey is where I am now and who I am now. I wouldn't be here. Certainly wouldn't be doing this work. And I'm grateful. You know, I went through a really hard thing last week with someone I love. And it was a big blow up, and it was really hard at the time, but it caused me to go and get some therapy around a particular issue. Like, I kind of get therapy intermittently as and when, and like work on an issue, and then I don't have it constantly. Mm-hmm. And it also led me to like have some really great conversations with my siblings. And it was just a good reminder that, you know, heartbreak example, no one would choose it. No one would choose heartbreak, but I am here today because of heartbreak. Like, the worst things that have happened to me have led to the best things, because it's, you know, a diamond is formed under pressure, and it's how you choose to meet those things. That's what makes us interesting. Like, Pete, I don't know about you, but people I've met who haven't really experienced much in life, it's not great dinner party guests, firstly.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah. So I think experience and the way that you choose to meet the hard things in life, that is really, like, life is full of hard things, but they are the things that shape you. It's not, the good things are great, but they don't shape you in the way the hard things do.
Yeah, and also you got to go. I still believe you got to go through the shitty times to get the good times, because you don't appreciate it if you're constantly up here. Yeah, it's like the whole thing of people see me, particularly on social media, and they're like, oh, you're so like happy clappy, and I'm like, yes, majority of the time I am, but that doesn't mean at times I'm like, well, this is shit, and this isn't how I would plan it, but here we are. But anyway, we're going very off topic. I want to touch on, you briefly touched on sort of your previous experience and that leading you to being who you are today and being in the job that you do now. So I was just wondering if you could speak a bit more on that, on the journey of how you ended up in the career that you have today.
Yeah, so, okay. Let's go all the way back. I think I'll start at 2010, because we'll go further back. So my parents struggled with addiction, and as a result, my way of dealing with that was just acting out a lot romantically from a young age. But what was most interesting is they got sober when I was around 16. And suddenly I remember going into sixth form, and I had this dream family life that I'd always wanted. And you'd think that that would be the happy end of the story. But actually what happened is I got worse the healthier they got, because I was so used to being around drama and chaos. So when that disappeared from my family unit, I went outside of the family and started creating it, which turns out from all the therapy I've had and all the books and all the, all the stuff I've researched since, that's very normal, because, water seeks its own level. So if you're used to what, like, my parents might have done their healing, but I hadn't, and I had to deal with the effects it had on me. And so my cheating, I cheated on every boyfriend I ever had. This got worse and worse and worse. And I came out of university, and I went straight into drama school, which was like the perfect place for me to act out. And then when I came out, and the thing is, because I was an A-star student, this comes back to the high achiever thing that we were talking about earlier. Because I was always an achiever, I was able to kind of hide, pretend to the world and my family that everything was great because I was popular. I had boyfriends. I was great at masking. I was a performer. So, I was really good at that. Mm-hmm. And then when I came out of drama school and I didn't get the agent and I wasn't getting the jobs, that I got bits and pieces, I really started to spiral because through all the drama, the one thing I'd had is like, oh, but I get the lead roles. Oh, but I achieve, I get the A-star, and that would give me just enough validation. And so then my love life got more and more chaotic. And I went and did this job. Like 2010 was the year that everything just was chaotic. And on the outside, I was living the high life. I was traveling the world with acting. I was doing some cool stuff, but inside I was spiraling. I was really spiraling. I'd been sexually assaulted by in several different very dark scenarios. I ended up working as a hostess in a strip club. That was one of the places I got sexually assaulted, and I didn't actually say that out loud for long years and years and years. I just pushed it down. And the best thing that ever happened to me that sort of led to doing what I'm doing now is that I ended up putting on 2 stone in 2 months on an acting job in China, in Shanghai. And when my parents picked me up from Heathrow Airport, they were sort of, I could tell they were like, oh my God, okay, something's up, because that's quite dramatic amount of weight to put on that fast. And that wasn't really like me. So my dad ended up taking me on this trip to Thailand. And when we were there, he said something that completely changed the trajectory of my life. He said, listen, I'm really worried about you. And if there's one piece of advice I can give you, it's this: focus on the insides and the outsides will take care of themselves. So, he'd probably said that before. I may have even heard it before, but it never landed. It was when I was on this health retreat, that there was no drinking, there was no boys. Like, I was just with myself. And it's like someone had given me this book called Women Who Love Too Much by an American therapist called Robin Norwood. And like everything about this book resonated with me. I remember just opening it. The first time I opened it, it was just before we went on this trip to Thailand. I was hungover in my friend's bed it was at the end of December, that time between Christmas and New Year. And I just saw this book on the shelf when she was in the shower, and something in me just like pulled me over to this book, picked it up, opened it randomly, and my eyes went straight to this sentence. And it said, daughters of drug addicts tend to inherit a predisposition to dysfunctional relationships with men. And I was just like, oh my God. And everything I was reading, I was like, oh my God, it just was me. And I realized, I was like, oh, this is because of the context, And I realized for the first time, just because your parents are okay, it doesn't mean that you are okay. Like, you've got to do your work. Like, I was in I think I was about 23 at this, 24, 25, something like 24, 25, something like that, 24. And yeah, it really spoke to me. And so when I got back from that trip in Thailand, I got therapy. I started attending 12-step fellowship called Al-Anon, which is for the friends and family of addicts and alcoholics. So I started to really look at, how as well, the type of guys that I was attracting. I was attracting very chaotic guys, like increasingly so. And so I just started doing a lot of deep work on myself. And in that process, like I remember being told in Thailand, like, and I was still an actor at this point, they were like, I did this healing session, and this woman said, you're going to write a book. And people are going to be, it makes me emotional remembering this. She said, people are going to be drawn to who you are, your inner life. And she was saying all these things at the time. I was like, but I'm an actor. Like, what are you on about? And then I found myself starting to like just get this idea for this book. And I got given these tickets by my friend's dad after this breakup I had. And it was to this event called Key Person with Influence by a guy called Daniel Priestley, who I've like coached with a few years ago. And he was talking about like, having a brand, doing good in the world, and, and a book could be part of that, and courses and all these different things. And I just was like, oh, it's not just a book. It's a whole thing, and it's a whole vision. And I set up a business with a friend called Addictive Daughter, and that got a lot of media attention. We got a book deal, we got a TV deal, we got all sorts of things. And in the process, I met my now husband. And it was interesting because we were together around a year, and my friend and my business was basically, it was like positive lifestyle movement for women in their 20s who are going through a quarter life crisis. That was kind of what we did, because that's what we were going through. But our main focus was relationships. It's what, even though we looked at money, work, all those things, like we were most interested in relationships. And so a year into meeting my husband, we got this TV deal, and my business partner, my friend Joey, we ended up walking away from it, which was really hard. But it was like something in us, and she was the first to call it out, and it was really hard to hear, but I knew she was right. It was like, just felt like that we'd come to the end of the journey together, and we were supposed to go on our own journeys. And so that's when I just knew, I was like, I want to focus purely on helping women with relationships. And increasingly it became not just women in general, but women who like me identify as high achievers, because there was something for me about that piece that, you know, that had caused me to feel so much shame, because I didn't have what a lot of other friends had. I wasn't engaged, and I was nearly 30, and, you know, I didn't have all these things, and I felt like such a failure. Like the biggest fear for me had always been to be seen as a failure. Like I cannot be a failure. And it was so, you know, I think everyone feels that, but I think if you identify as a high achiever, and I've always been like the A-star student, like that for me was like, it just was like unacceptable, intolerable. And so that's essentially what I've been doing since. I've been with my husband now just over 9 years, and got an amazing relationship. We still have struggles and challenges, and everything I teach, like I have to practice myself, because if I don't, it very soon catches up with me. And yeah, so it's been a journey. I've been doing this work for started on this path of self-healing like 13 years ago now. So a lot has happened in that time. Yeah,
it's amazing to hear, and amazing to hear the whole journey to now where you're at is. But I want to pull on a thread that you mentioned earlier of like people feeling like they need to, I call it like the keeping up with Joneses mentality, because I'm 25, I'm seeing a lot of my friends, they're going, oh, my friends are having babies, they're having kids, they're having houses, they're doing this, they're earning this amount of money. How do you deal with a client that might be struggling with that, a young client that's sitting there going, I feel like I've been left behind, and I don't know what to do? Yeah,
that literally was my first business, and my friends, that's what it was born out of. And now obviously I'm more like, it's when you hit 30 and that's the whole, it's like just goes, it's that even more. It's like what you're feeling now, it gets worse unless you do that. We talked earlier about beliefs and expectations. And it's like the realizing, and I have to just remind myself as much as anyone else and clients all the time, it's like, it's a construct. We are basically animals, you know, mortgages, taxes, all of the shit, it's all made up. Money is all made up. We have made up this thing of like, you need to be here by this time. Says fucking who? Like there's a million different ways our life could go. And so I'm quite like, I actually wrote a poem in my book that it got really popular called Fuck the Timeline, because I needed to hear that. Like I once remember overhearing these two women. I was in a bar or something, and I was in the toilet, and I heard them talking, and I heard one of them say to the other, you know, everyone knows that like after the age of 30, a man's value in the social marketplace, particularly with dating, goes up and a woman's goes down, you know, because women are like more than men. It's like men, it's about success and you're successful with money, career. This is obviously very archaic patriarchy bullshit, but this kind of the world still have this view. Women, it's like your success is more the sphere of the home, and you know, you're being in a relationship. And obviously now it's also women is like also got to have a career and the money and the kid. Like you got to do all of the things, which is just impossible. Or like you can do it all, but you'll probably have a breakdown in the process. And so it infuriated me so much. I was like, no, I refuse to accept that I get worse with age, because that's not true. I'm like, baby, I'm a fine fucking wine. I get better with age. And I have really had to drill it in to my psyche. It's like, it doesn't mean I don't make mistakes, but my God, am I so much better at how I handle them now. And like I even had something happen today that like it triggered that feeling of being a failure, and like I've made a mistake and I fucked up, and then I can try and go into overcompensating and all of this shit. And I was like, Persia, you had a moment, but you know what? You took responsibility for it. And what else can you do? Like you're making a living amends. It's also not that big a deal what happened. It's like I massively overblow it. So we are conditioned because of particularly the Instagram culture, like to be our own worst enemy. We compare our like insides to everyone's like highlights reel. And it's just when you actually talk to people and you're vulnerable with them and you say, look, I'm really struggling with this, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go, I feel exactly the same. So it requires vulnerability, first of all, with yourself to go like, I'm struggling and I don't feel good enough. And then I'm going to talk to people about this, people that you feel safe around, not like if someone's got no self-awareness and is so in the denial bubble that they couldn't possibly admit that they were struggling with things because it's all got to look perfect, like that's not the person you want to talk to. Everyone feels the fucking same. I'm 38 now. I'm aware. I'm like, oh, I'm about to do the 40 thing. But do you know what? I don't feel the same fear around turning 40 that I did around turning 30. There's something about the 20s that I think is harder because it's, you know, I have a lot more life experience. I've been through a lot now. And everyone says like, do you know what? Your 30s are better than your 20s because you know yourself more. You know, like you've got more life experience. You kind of know what you're available for and what you're not, if you've been doing the work on yourself, obviously. And so I've just like, that's what I'm going to choose. Like, you know, certain aspects of society and our culture says, especially as a woman, the older you get, the worse it is. And I'm like, no, I'm going to listen to the people that say every decade it gets better. And, you know, I'm like, great, can't wait to be in my 50s. It's going to be fantastic. But I'm just like, I'm really proud of myself, how I navigated. Like when I think about where I was in my early 20s and I was so lost. I was like, literally, I'm surprised I didn't die. And that's how like chaotic I was. And so you've got to cut yourself some fucking slack, realize everyone feels the same, even the people that you look at. And I'm telling you, I've had clients who are like Oscar nominated actors who are like the top of their game. And I'll be honest, my experience is that they actually feel worse than the average Joe because the
top of the mountain's the loneliest place, isn't it?
Really true. And so it's all a fucking illusion. It is an illusion that when you meet that goal, everything's suddenly going to feel right. It doesn't mean to say, listen, I've had people sometimes criticize me because they think that I'm putting forward that like you're not complete unless you get a relationship. Like that's bullshit. It's the opposite. I say you've got to be complete first and realize that your relationship with you is the primary one. But we are designed for connection. And that, look, listen, I've worked with people who are polyamorous, all sorts of different, it can look different, but it's about connection, honesty, transparency, respect, like all of these things. It's not what it looks like, it's what it feels like. And yeah, I've gone off on one here, but like to anyone who is in that place right now, I've been there. There's moments where I can still be there. Like it's not good enough, you know. And let me tell you, I've ticked off so many of the fucking bucket list things. And I still have those moments where I go, but she's done this and I'm not as good because I've done, you know, I had 2 friends over last night and we bought this house in the end of 2020 and we renovated it, been renovating it over the last year or so, and it's never fucking done. The job's never done. And so like if my 25-year-old self could look at where I am today, it'd be like, oh my God, the things you've achieved in your career, the marriage to the most amazing man, like there's so many things. And yet when you're here, it's because of the negativity bias, it's very easy to still go and compare yourself and like it's not good enough. So it's like it is a daily reprieve and reminding yourself and reconditioning to yourself to say, where I am is fucking amazing. I'm so proud of myself. It's never going to be done because life is never done. It's still evolving, but you're doing fucking great. And to learn how to be your own biggest cheerleader. And the irony is that when you do that and you basically change the neural pathways in your brain, which tell you you're not good enough, you're a failure, because that's, again, what we're bombarded with 24/7, you will naturally start to attract in the better things because you're more relaxed, your nervous system is relaxed. And that all the best things in my life, like you were saying how you met your lovely girlfriend, all the best things in my life have come when I fucking relax. It doesn't mean there's not work and action to take, but when I'm in that like stress, anxiety, push, all that happens is that things are just stressful. And I've realized I'm like, I just want to enjoy my life and I go slower. And I've like, just to start wrapping it up on this very long-winded answer, but you know, I've just accepted that basically the months of August and the month of December particularly, there are like July can be a bit slow, but I am not like work. They are my months. Like August is like, look, it's the last time of summer. My most important thing here is connection and quality time. And December is Christmas. There's so much going on, but it's like relation. It's like I would not be a good dating and relationship coach if I wasn't actually prioritizing in dating and relationships, not just romance, all of them over the work. And that's what the balance I have to go from. It's like, yeah, you can achieve. And I've had many clients who have prioritized achieving above all else. And then they felt super fucking lonely and depressed. It's like you said, it's like you could be up at the top of the mountain with all this money and all, all this acclaim and all the accolades. But what the fuck is the point? Like, what the fuck is the point?
Yeah.
Because on your deathbed, everyone always says the thing on the deathbed is like, it's the people you love. It's the love and it's the experiences. That is the most important thing. So we have to actually show up in our day-to-day decisions. Doesn't mean, again, that we don't work and we're lazy all the time, but prioritize the things that you say are important, or that you really, like, if you were on your deathbed, what would you care about? Put those things first and do that now. When you're 25 and if you make relationships your currency, you're fucking killing it.
I completely agree. It's a conversation that particularly me and Gina have had very recently about where we actually want to go with our lives, where we want to take it. And the two, funny enough, we kind of balance each other out, because I give one piece of advice. I always say, zoom out. If someone's in a really frantic hole, zoom out and actually look at how far you've come. Mm-hmm. Because actually it's a lot further than you think. And then the piece of advice that Gina often gives is, you made the best decision you could make with the information you had at the time. So you can't beat yourself up about a decision that you made, because you would have made the best decision you could have with the information you had. That information can change, but that doesn't change the decision that you made at that time.
Yeah.
So it's probably my 2 cents on it. But with a relationship, obviously, you've spoken about working on yourself being a big part of maintaining a good relationship, both with friendships and with intimacy. What else is like some of the main ingredients for a good, strong relationship?
The number one, it's so boring because it's so obvious, communication. It's the thing that people struggle with most, including myself. I am so much better. I've had to really unlearn, and this is what women have been, in fact, I've got a whole chapter in my book on this. It's that women, we've got to remember, we were conditioned to be silent, chaste, obedient for a lot of history. And so when, men, in my experience, get really pissed off when you go passive aggressive, but it's like, because it hasn't felt safe to use our voices. We would be burned at the bloody stake as women, and I think that still lives in us. And I think with men, it's like, generally speaking, again, my experience is like they can really struggle communicating their feelings, because they've been conditioned to like, no, you're not allowed to have feelings and you've got to be strong and all of this shit. And it's so toxic. So you have to, the things you can't learn to communicate effectively until you spend the time becoming self-aware and understanding yourself. And that's why coaching and therapy is so helpful as tools before you go out into your life and, with other people in your life, being better able to communicate with them. You've really got to learn how to be in good relationship with yourself. And that means how to take accountability, responsibility for your mistakes. So important in a relationship. Know when to speak up and when to shut the fuck up, because most of the time we're speaking up when we should shut the fuck up, and we're not speaking up when we should. And, it's also like, I say every day pretty much, the serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. And when you apply that to relationships, it's like, God, listen, I fucking loved a boyfriend project. I'm like, right, I'm going to change how you look, how you speak, how you, like, all of it, because I'm going to fix you, and I'm going to turn you. And it's like, you can change the other person. And I feel like the universe really wanted to have a cosmic joke on me with this, because they gave me the messiest man in all the land. Like, his literal nickname was, I didn't know this when I met, because we met very randomly at a festival twice. Like, it was a very crazy synchronistic love story. And when I put a picture of him up on my Facebook a week after we met, my friend, one of my best mates I'd gone to school with, grown up with, she commented and said, "Oh my God, are you dating Messy Joe?" And that she'd been in calls with him at uni. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, firstly, that you know him, but also of all the men I could have, amidst thousands of people, twice on Friday night and then again on Saturday, I had to stand next to Messy Joe, and I'm like anally neat and sort of controlling. So I've been like, and of course at first, especially when I moved in with him, like, oh my God, I really struggled with the control. And that, and I am so, I mean, listen, I'm not perfect. I can still be controlling, but we now have quite a joke around it. He's definitely helped chill me out, and I've definitely helped him be less messy, not perfect, but a hell of a lot better than he used to be. Because honestly, naturally, he is feral. And so that's a big thing, is like realizing you can't control the other person. It's a really painful truth, but you can control how you show up, how you react. You can control, and you know what, if you have to ultimately weigh up, you know, I call it the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of the time, our relationship is great and worth it. And 20%, I want to fucking kill him, or I can't stand him, or we really, really struggle. Because those are like, if you've got 80-20, you're doing really well. And guess what? The hard 20, that's where the growth happens. So even though you think that that's the problem, often that's the part where the growth happens. And you have to ultimately weigh up, like, does this bring more positivity to my life or less? And, you know, I've had clients where it's like, and I've been in relationships myself where it's 50-50, and I'm like, they're not good enough odds for me. I don't expect it to be great 100% of the time, but I need 75-80%. That's good. And the other part, it's about working on it. And you will do, I believe that being in a relationship is like, if you really want to work on yourself, get in a relationship, because the other person's the mirror. They will show you everything that you struggle with or that you don't like about yourself. They'll bring it all up. But if it's mainly a good relationship, they'll also show you the great things about yourself. You'll be able to be yourself with that person. You'll be able to, for the most part, feel safe and have that respect. And so, yeah, respect is a huge part of it as well. Absolutely key in a relationship. And if you don't have respect for one another, and obviously you're going to have moments where you don't, because again, we're human, but if you don't have respect, the minute the respect, it's like the trust, when the trust and respect goes, you can get them back, but it's not easy. It's really not easy.
Trust is probably the most, I would say, the most difficult. Maybe that's a personal prejudice I have, but I think trust is probably the hardest, because once someone breaks that trust, it's very hard to go, oh, but if they did it once, they can do it again.
Yeah.
And that's really tricky to overcome. But I completely agree. I think communication, I mean, I keep saying, I think I've realised recently that every problem in life comes down, if you track it all the way back, is communication. If you look at a business deal that's failed, an argument that's happened, a relationship that's failed, all comes back to communication, because someone wasn't able to actually articulate what they actually meant to say, and then someone then wasn't able to receive it in the way that it was intended.
That's exactly it.
Crazy.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask, you obviously mentioned about like you and your husband being quite different and being almost opposite. It's a suspicion I've had for a little while. Do you find that some of your most successful relationships with clients and stuff, they're in relationships where almost they're like chalk and cheese, their partners?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what I like to say is that in Asia, where my husband and I have spent a lot of time, they often say same, but different. And that's like literally it with our relationships. And a healthy relationship, my parents are a great example. In some ways, they are the opposite. But in many ways, they're also very, very similar. And you need to have... Values is key. Like if you don't have the same values, that can be a real problem. You can obviously have some different values, but your core values, if you have different values, that's a problem. But like, for example, my dad loves to go trekking in the mountains, and he'll go off for like months at a time. But then my mum will like come and meet. My mum is very glamorous. She is not an outdoorsy person. She is like shopping, glamour, all of that. And so so they'll like, Dad will go trekking, Mum will come for like the beginning or the end of the trip, and they'll go and like have like a really lovely time. And that's really worked for them. And it's obviously there's things that are hard about that as well. But my husband and I, we have so much in common, and that's where you connect and you have the common ground. But we have enough differences that we are also independent people. Like we have our separate lives as well as our life together. Like people are often like, I can't believe like we spend a lot of time apart, partly because my husband works in film, and so like at the moment he's away in a job. And honestly, it's like it would be so easy for either of us to cheat, because we have so much trust in our relationship. It's like if he doesn't, it wouldn't be like he just wouldn't come home and not tell me. Like he calls, we speak every day. We've got very good communication between us, and we just feel very safe and trusting of each other. And I've really learned that, you know, the differences, like I learned so much from him, from the differences, and he learned so much from me. So, you know, I don't think if you are sometimes you see a couple and you're like, you are so different in every way, and unfortunately the core values, and I've never really seen it work. Whereas as long as you've got the core values the same, then the differences, like, I think can be a really positive thing, and they keep it interesting and spicy.
If two individuals are exactly the same, though, would you say that's a recipe for disaster?
I think it's quite rare that they're it depends. It depends, because there's so many, like, I think it's rare that a couple are like exactly the same in every way. And if they are, then I think, probably that it is a bit of, it's not necessarily a recipe for disaster, but let's put it this way, it's going to have challenges. If me and it's like, you basically, this is it. What I used to think is, like, to be a good team, you've both got to be strong in the same areas. I'm like, no, to be a good team, it's better
fill the
to
gaps.
You fill the gaps. So if I was as messy as my husband, we would live in a literal shithole. Like, it would be awful. Yeah. Whereas if I was, if he was he's really super, like, he's relaxed, he's really good at going with the flow. I naturally am not, but I'm so much better at it than I used to be. Yep. So it's exactly that. We fill in the gaps. So the difference is, you kind of, where one of you is not so great, hopefully the other one is great. And there are a few things, like me and my husband, we're both not great with, like, actually, admin, I would say I'm better. I just don't enjoy it, but who the bloody hell does? Like, he is like allergic to admin. Yeah. He absolutely hates it. So there's certain areas where, one of you's better, but like, neither of you really want to do it. Like, just like chores and things, just the practical things. No one ever talks about the practical business of living with someone. And sometimes you just got to go, look, both of us hate it, but one of us has to do it. So I'm willing to, and again, it's grown-ups. Like, I'll do this bit and you do the other, you do something else. So it's all this grown-up shit that, no one wants to do it, but you've got to. So you just have to put your big girl, big boy pants on and get on with it.
Yeah. It's weird, because it's one thing that we've spoken a bit about, not keeping some of the prejudices we've had towards society's had towards women for quite some time. One of the things I always found really weird with that, in terms of my family situation, is it sounds really silly, but one of the things we use is like, with my mum and dad, it's very much, oh, that's a blue job, that's a pink job, but it relates perfectly to what you just said of, like, that doesn't necessarily really mean, it happens to be that in my family setup, it is very stereotypical, the pink jobs and the blue jobs, but that doesn't mean that it has to be that way for everyone's relationship. Like, I think my main role my two roles with me and Gina is I drive everywhere, and then also I cook, whereas I can't clean or washing. That's like completely not my realm, not my circus, not my monkey. So Gina just carries on. So it works. It's finding what works for your relationship, and also communicating that and understanding, this is my role, this is your role. It sounds really bad because it turns it into almost like a business. But it works. I actually do a lot of work with clients on this, because we all want the romance, but it's like the things that break you up. And if you look at divorce, it's money. It's the practical business of living is where people end up really irritating each other and falling out, and the romance goes. So you have to learn that, especially when you move in together. You really have to learn how to navigate the tricky things. And my God, have I been on a journey with that, because I'd never officially lived with a bloke before. I'd stayed with them and but I always had a backpack. I never shared bills. And so when I moved in with my husband, it was not this big, beautiful love story that I wanted it to be. Like, and bear in mind that, when did I move in? Was it towards the end of 2016? So long ago now. So we lived, and this is another thing I always say to clients, is like, don't make any big decisions in the first year. Don't get engaged, married, pregnant. Whoops.
Then I know, well, this is a lot of people go, but I'm not saying it can't work, but the odds are stacked against you, because a lot happens in that first year. And so it's like, if you can go slow, like, there's no rush.
Yeah.
But I remember when I moved in, and and he was so messy, and I really struggled. I was like, I thought it was going to be something else. So we had so many fights. It was just really painful. And I always want to be real about these things, because I kind of thought there was something wrong with me or something wrong with us. And bear in mind, given the work I do, I felt like a failure again. I was like, here I go, so familiar to feel like a failure. And actually, it's just like, it's really normal. it's really normal. A lot of people go through it, and if we just talked about it, and you just need to have a toolkit. That's what you need, and it comes back to bloody boring old communication. There's no way around it. Like, Lord knows I've tried to find one.
I mean, it's interesting. The reason why I automatically smirked was because one of the more shocking parts of mine and Gina's story is the fact that she moved into my family home at 9 months in, and we are now 7 months in, still saving to move out, but still live with my mum and dad, and somehow it works. So,
well, you're winning if that works. And actually, you know what? 9 months, it's not a year, it's not ideal, but it's better than 3 months. I've had clients up and they've like literally been dating someone for a few months and they move it. And I'm just like, And also, you know what? The good thing about living with your mum and dad, there's a lot of good things there, but it's like, God forbid you broke up and she had to move out. It's easier. Like, it's hard. It's harder in a lot of ways. Emotionally, that's really hard. But just the logistics of fucking renting a flat, it's all of that shit. At least you got that on your side. You know, you have to look for the silver lining.
I think the worst thing is, I think I kind of, in a weird way, and I don't often say this about my parents, I kind of lucked out with my parents because they are literally... Everyone goes, oh, are you ever worried about your parents' plan? God, no. My mum needs dad and dad needs mum. So it just works. And I think... that's why I asked the chalk and cheese question, because my parents are very much chalk and cheese. My dad is the most mellow man you'll ever meet. He's just, whatever. Whereas my mum is a bit more, she's the business brain. So she's like on all the time. But yeah, it's interesting. And I'm really intrigued as well about you mentioned about money causing a lot of friction between relationships. And it's something that I'm always quite surprised at. I think where, again, I grew up in a situation where mum and dad know everything about each other. I mean, I always joke and say dad's never got money in his account because mum controls it all. But I always find that the fact that people are so secretive with their money, it makes no sense in a relationship. I get, obviously, early doors, if you're like a month or so in or 6 months in, but when you're talking years, you're like, why are you still being so secretive? Like, sure, I've got a very old school view of like, if you're in a relationship, this is the long game. This isn't the short one. So what's the point in being secretive? Yeah,
it's so interesting. I genuinely feel like we are more likely to know our friends' favorite sex position or like really intimate stuff about them than like, I have no idea how much actual money is in like friends' account. Like, I have no idea. And that's okay. Like, I get but it's like, what is it? We're so... You know, why are we so secretive and afraid? It's like there's so much shame and weirdness. And so, like, we don't know. It's one of those things we make up stories in our head because I'm like, I genuinely don't know where I am in terms, like, you just don't know. So money's, because it's linked with, you know, survival. There's a lot of shame and a lot of fear associated with money. And I think that's why the secrecy is there, because it's like, people get really afraid of being judged, of people wanting to take it, of not having enough and therefore not being enough. Like, there's just, it's such deep, like, that, you know, I mean, that's almost a whole other podcast episode. I talk about money a lot, and especially how money plays into relationships, because it's the number one cause of divorces. And so we should talk about it more. And I really do that work with my clients now. But it's definitely like it's very taboo. It's very taboo.
It is, and I think a lot of it, as I say, I think a lot of it relates to status, because it's almost like, I think when I think of it from the male context, it's almost like, I've got to have enough to seem alpha, because that's still a mentality that some men have. But then also, I think it's about knowing how to manage it also comes back to, no one teaches you mortgages, no one teaches you finance in school, so we don't have the financial upbringing that we should have, which then creates that friction later in life. I mean, I'm, again, very lucky in the fact that one of my parents' money is what they do for a living, so
that's handy.
I grew up very aware of how it all works and kind of brought Gina into that loop. So that was just pure fluke, but for your average Joe, they haven't got that. And I think that's where... My opinion is that's where a lot of the friction comes from, because we don't have the full you don't have the full toolkit. You
Yeah.
might have a hammer and a few nails, but that's about it.
Yeah, completely. I completely agree. So I think that doing the work around money is, again, it's a whole other thing. But if you don't, there's no way it won't come up in your romantic life. There's just no way. So
Yeah,
it's important.
100%. I'm going to pull a complete 180 and ask you a question that I want to ask, because we've had someone speak on it from the male perspective, and I want to get your perspective as a female, is masculinity and toxic masculinity and the whole topic of masculinity in a relationship. What's your viewpoint on it? What have you seen with clients? What's worked? What hasn't worked?
Well, it just doesn't work, really, does it? Like, that is, again, it's very archaic, the old sort of patriarchal view, and which is sort of men need to be strong, they need to be the alpha, they need to bring in the bacon, they need to, all of these things, body, they need to be, there's just so many aspects of it that are a huge pressure on men, and that are a huge create huge conflict in relationships, because it's very transactional of like, I'm going to be this man and I'm going to do this and you're going to be this woman, and it's like pushing you into these binary stereotypes that just don't serve us. And so it comes back down to, like, really, I think the crux of it is what Brene Brown talks about, vulnerability. The way that we deal with this is like, be vulnerable and learn, like, speaking your truth. You can't speak your truth until you have worked through that yourself. And so, my husband, he's actually very connected to his feminine, but he can really struggle when he's going through a hard time. He completely closes down. Despite what I do for a living, he couldn't be with someone I know this stuff because it's what I do, but it's just so programmed in him. And yet he's like the best person when someone else is struggling. He is there. He's like such a power of support. And that I often see as well. So it's like, I think this is where men need more examples of men. This has really helped my husband, because as much as I want to be the one to help him with that, actually we met another guy at a festival I meet all my favorite people at festivals, basically, who's become one of our best friends. And they've just developed this beautiful friendship, and they really support each other. And I think that's the thing, is like, the way that you deal with toxic masculinity is, yes, there's work between men and women, but there's also like men and men supporting one another and being brave and being vulnerable. So it shows them, and like, we really respect, like, our mate, our new friend, a couple of years now. He is like the coolest guy, very successful. Like, he says, I used to be like the epitome of toxic masculinity, and now it's like, he's really connected to his feminine. He's been really open about when he was suicidal and all of these things. So actually helps. It's kind of helps my husband Joe more when he's going through a hard time to speak to our other friends than me. Like, and then speak to me afterwards. Do you know what I mean? When he's processed with this guy. And there was a moment where I was like, oh, why is he not coming to me first? And I was like, do you know what? I don't need it. Like, I don't need that validate. I don't need, as his wife, to be number one. Like, we have different people for different things. And I'm like, if that's what he needs to be able to feel more comfortable, speaking to his wife, that's fine. Who am I to say that that's not, like, do you know what I mean? Everyone will find their own way and their own path. So it's understanding, it's compassion. But I've really seen, as I said, from experience, that the most effective way with toxic masculinity is when men are open with each other about what.
100%. And I think with the whole masculinity argument, it's just about taking it too far. There's definite positives to keeping some of those more masculine values, but it's, again, staying fluid and not being like, I need to be this. This is what being a man means. It's just, this bit works for me, this bit doesn't, so I'm going to get rid of that, add this in. As I say, I've always been quite fortunate, I think, growing up with both parents being very strong, and also having an older sister. I like to think I'm fairly in touch with my more feminine side, which has helped massively. But for others that haven't had that situation, it's just, again, you say lean on your friends, because I've had that recently. Like, I've had literally the same example that you just given of, I find comfort in probably one or two friends that I wouldn't bring to Gina, because, again, like you say, I kind of need to understand my thought process of it, get them to play a sounding board and be like, okay, I now know what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly that. Yeah.
And also as well, I think one thing I've realised as I've got older, is the age gap thing that we experience when we're a lot younger is such a big thing that we need to get rid of, because I've learned so much from my older friends.
Yeah. Oh my God. Completely. I've got friends who are like in their 60s, and I've got friends who are like in their early 20s. Like I'm not interested in age. I'm like the person. And I love, it's interesting. It's interesting. You learn a lot about yourself when you're the youngest, and you learn a lot about yourself when you're the oldest, and also about yourself when you're in it, like that, because it's different context, different relationships, different experiences. But I always go by the person. I'm like, are you a decent person? Like we met last week. We're at Wilderness Festival, which is where I met my husband, and we were celebrating 9 years together. And we met this girl called Darcy, who's 22, and she became, like, we had a group of about 30 of us. They're all sort of in their 30s generally. And one of my mates is late 40s. One of my new best mates that I've met this year. We really clicked. And this girl, she's 22, and she was like our little mascot, and it was just so gorgeous. Like, she really brought something to the group because she was younger. So it's just like letting go of all this bullshit preconceived things around age, because it is nonsense. Again, it's just like you either get on with someone or you don't.
But it's exactly what we said earlier. It's about filling each other's gaps.
Yeah.
Because that slightly younger person's probably bringing a perspective that you and the group that already exist have now lost. So then it's like reminding you, oh yeah, actually that is a thing that we need to think about. Yeah. And that's, again, it's that whole thing of, it works for friendships as well. Fill each other's gaps. I mean, it sounds really sad, but there's a TV show that has the saying, fill the gaps and stay liquid. And it's something that me and Gina say to each other all the time now.
I love that.
And it's, as I say, it's just play to each other's strengths, and also don't follow social norms. And talking of social norms, the other thing I was going to ask you is, what role do you think social media has played in the modern relationship and what you're seeing with clients? Like, have you seen, see, we spoke about earlier that it's causing a lot more comparison. It's causing a lot more people going, I'm missing out on this, not doing this, I've not done this right. So what else are you seeing with clients?
I mean, to be honest, I think that's really it. It's like the energy that we go into, like creating this hologram of ourselves and our life of being this perfect thing. And therefore we think that that's what we need to do to make someone fall for us. And we might attract someone, but we're attracting them based on a pack of lies, really, or like a very, some of it's not all bullshit, but it's like one slither of reality. And so listen, I'm like, as long as you get that it's a game, and when you meet up in person or when you actually connect with each other, you remember that it's not real. And that's the key, because when you start, and I think we've all done it, where you kind of fall into the trap of like, oh, I've got to like project this illusion, or I've got to live up to this thing. And it becomes very shallow and very, very quite lonely and quite sad. And so I'm just like, you know what? People fall in love with each other through connection. Connection can only come from intimacy. Intimacy can only come from vulnerability and truth. And so that's why people fall in love with one another, not because you've got perfect cheekbones or great skin, or like life looks really fucking great and you can go to this cool place and that cool place. Like, those are all fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with those things, but do not base your happiness and your identity on it, because it's a rocky foundation and it is an illusion, and it will always bite you in the arse. And I have learned that the hard way. I think we all have. We all know it's not real. Yeah. On that note, I worked with someone who was a billionaire oligarch's daughter. And I, was on the private jet and all of these things. And it was really good to experience like the height of money, success, luxury, glamour, and to see like, oh, but these are still just humans and they struggle with the same things. And actually it's not all it's cracked up to be, because you very quickly normalize, believe it or not. I'm going to sound like a right arsehole. I remember being on the jet, being like, this is I might never do this again, but I was like, oh my God, you normalize to it very quickly. And I was like, you know what? I'd rather I could be on an easy jet flight with my best mate, and I'd be having fun. It's like, it's not it comes back to the inner experience.
People.
Those things, it's the people, it's the connection. That is what's real. It's not the form, it's not the image, it's how it feels. That's key. And we have to keep reminding ourselves of that, because social media and all of those things, it's only going to get more and more as we move forward, isn't it? It's only going to get more intense. So you have to keep remembering what truth is, and stay close to your values and what's important to you.
I completely agree. And I think even for me, I sit there and go, some of the best times were the times where I didn't have a lot of money, or it was not very well planned, or something didn't quite go to plan. But because those are the ones that stick in your memory, rather than the ones that are like nailed down, perfectionist, did everything perfect. It's, as I say, it all comes down to the experience. And I think I kind of had that epiphany probably about a year ago now, and that's changed my perspective a lot. And I think I'm quite lucky to have already had that thought at such a young age, because I feel like oftentimes you see it with people later. But yeah, massively helpful. Another thing I wanted to bring up and see if you dealt with it with clients is, oftentimes we've spoken a lot about family and parents and in general. Have you had many struggles with clients that have had negative influence from family members, whether that be the parents might not have had the best relationship, or the brother or the sister might not have had the best relationship, or on the flip side of that, one of the family members doesn't like the new boyfriend, doesn't like the new girlfriend? Have you dealt with that scenario?
All of it. And I've experienced, in my own experience, but clients, friends, and it just again comes down to, like, sometimes that is the reality, is that your family might not like your partner, or your partner might not like your family, or there may be issues that come up. And so it comes back to bloody communication again, and learning how to be a grown up and to say to your family, listen, my sense is that you don't really like my partner, my new boyfriend, or whatever. And that hurts me. I feel really sad about that, because it's really important to me. And I don't want to pressure you or push you. I don't want to force this, but I want you to understand how important it is to me. And it's just coming down of, like, expressing your truth, and you can change things and you can work on things, but the problem is, so much of the time, again, we're really bad at communicating. I think particularly in this country, it's the stiff upper lip, and we just sweep things under the carpet. I've learned the hard way. You've got to address the elephant in the room. You've got to address the thing, but you've got to learn how to do it in a way that's healthy, like not blaming or projecting your stuff onto them. And you can also always say, I love just prefacing saying, look, I could be wrong. Because if you say that, you'll find maybe you've got the wrong end of the stick. Maybe it's not what you think. It's just you're insecure about it. So you say, look, I could be wrong, but my sense is. That's a really good sentence stem for hard conversations. And the key is, like, to really be calm in your energy whenever you're got to communicate something that's hard. It's like, don't do it when you're reactive and when you're kind of your nervous system is all, like, heightened and stressed. Like, go and do the work that you need to do to get yourself centered and grounded before having that hard conversation.
100%. And I was going to come on to there's something I've dealt with. I'm not going to name any names, but I'm intrigued to get your perspective. If an individual has had a partner be introduced to the family, they had a bad experience with said partner, and then they have a very close relationship with that family, and their gut reaction is, okay, I'm going to keep my partner away from my family, but I'm still going to see them on a one-to-one basis. Do you think that's a good way of dealing with it, in terms of, because my gut instinct with it was, if you don't allow them to build new memories of that person, that's the preconception that they're going to have for that person going forward. But I completely understood the whole, but it always causes problems whenever we try and do introductions. Yeah. So I completely understood it. I just thought I'd get your perspective just to see, as a real life example.
Yeah. It's a hard one, because again, like, you gotta have the hard conversations, and sometimes you might have the hard conversation and someone is not budging, and they're just gonna like, if I had that and my family, for example, this isn't true, but if they just kept being rude, or it just kept turning out well, I was like, I don't want to put my partner through that. But then I would put boundary down with my family and say, this isn't acceptable to me. And because the thing is, we might have judgments. It all comes down to personal boundaries. If my partner was an asshole to them, then it's fair enough that they have boundaries. But if they're not, and it's just the family projecting shit, then you need to have the boundary. It comes down to self-awareness and looking at, and if your partner is being a bit of an ass, you need to say, listen, they're my family. It's really important to me. I've definitely had those conversations, and everyone's got to take ownership. And some people will not take ownership. And I've had times where I've had to put boundary, whether it's with friends, whatever. I've said like, okay, this is important to me. I've explained what I need from you. You're not giving that, or you're not able to meet that. And so I'm going to have to step back from this relationship, or at least, not to a degree. And when there's consequences like that, that's not manipulative, but it's like, there's got to be a consequence because this is not healthy and this doesn't feel good. People tend to step up, but not always. And you've got to accept that. It's like, you can put a boundary down and someone would be like, I'm not willing to meet that. And that's when you have to step back. And it's really fucking hard sometimes, but that's just life.
And then on the plus side, I suppose, as well, with that, putting that boundary down, you then have a clear indication of where you stand. Because my big thing is, one of my personal things I don't like with people is I don't like, if I don't know where I stand with you, that puts me very on edge.
Yeah, I'm the same.
I don't like not knowing how to deal with you. If you're a dickhead, I'll deal with you as if you're a dickhead. But if you're not a dickhead, I need to know that.
Yeah, I get that. I'm exactly the same. It comes back to like just clarity and communication and like being real and trusting your energy. Like there's certain people I'm like, I don't know why, but I don't feel safe around this person.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that you necessarily write them off. But if there's certain behaviors that they display that you're like, okay, you might just have to really look after yourself. Yeah.
And also it's more just being wary of it. It might be, as you say, I might be wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm very aware that I might be wrong, but I'm going to put my boundary up for now until I've been sort of proven otherwise.
Yeah.
As a last question, before I ask the last question I ask every guest, what do you think about the increasing number of people that are remaining children-free? Like, it's been an interest. It was one of it was one of those things that came up, and I was like, actually, I've never even thought about the fact that my generation, particularly, we're leaning more towards remaining children-free because I think because of the cost of living and everything happening, but not only that, with everything happening in the world at the moment, a lot of people are taking the viewpoint of, why would I want to bring a child into this at the moment?
Well, this is exactly where I'm at. As I said earlier, I'm 38 and I've never felt called to have kids. And I know a lot of that was trauma as a child. But, my sister went through what I did and she's desperate to have kids. And so it's not, my friend wrote an amazing book called Women Without Kids. And when I was reading that, I was just like, this is my truth. I have been shamed. I have people constantly asking me, when are you going to have them? My husband doesn't get that shit.
I hate that.
My husband does not get asked like I do. And I actually have got to the point when people ask me that, and I say, are you going to ask my husband that as well? And it's I'm like, no, I'm going to hold you accountable. I know people mean well. They're not, the majority of the time, they're not trying to be assholes. But although I have been called, you're really selfish for not wanting kids. And I'm like, so many people who've told me they want kids, they've said like, well, who's going to look after you when you're old? I'm like, well, that's quite a selfish reason to have a child, so that one day when I'm old, I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. I'm like, how about just work and save up or whatever, just don't put that on a child. But what I've really discovered about myself is that I'm a fantastic auntie, and I knew I would be. And my Joe's brother, my husband Joe's brother, recently had a baby. She's like probably about 8 months now, and they've moved to our village, and I'm so happy. Like, I just love it. And partly it's like I get to do all the fun bits and then I can give her back. I don't have the same responsibility. But my biggest value is freedom. And I know you can have kids and still freedom be a big value, but let's be honest, it's not that easy. And I just, that's just where I am. And I'm not saying never, like, it could happen. I think Cameron Diaz has just had a baby at 47, I'm pretty sure. But who knows? I think that the fact is we do have too many people on this planet. Women gaining so much more autonomy in the world is a huge part in this, and having more control over career, money, all these things. You know, we would have all just been having kids in our early 20s back in the day, and things have changed so much.
Yeah.
So I think listen, some people still really want to have kids and some people don't. And I'm just like, you do you. Like, who the fuck am I to say
100%.
what you should want or what's right for you? It's none of my fucking business. So, you know, and a lot of people like myself are like, I'm not super conflicted. I'm like, the conflict I have is that I don't think I'm conflicted. I think I just don't want kids. And then I think, oh my God, like, you know, as a woman,
not normal?
It's that you get. That's the conflict. You know what I mean? It's the actual conflict around whether to have them or not.
I hear that. I mean, I say this as well, I've seen it with my sister, the questioning, the constant interrogation. And I think that the bit that annoys me as someone who has a lot of female friends is I'm saying, like, we also know that it's getting notoriously hard to conceive. So for anyone to be constantly like, so when are you going to have kids? Are you going to pop one out? Are you going to do... It's like... Just leave them be.
Like I said, it's really expensive, and it's like, you know, we're like, many people are just struggling to keep food on the table and a roof over the head, and you think, and listen, there are people who really want kids, and I don't understand them, but I'm like, good for you. Like I don't know what that feels like, but I just don't judge anyone for what they want or what they don't want. And some people have kids that didn't want them. Some people can't have kids that wanted them. There's so many different shades in all of this. It's not, and again, what our culture wants to put in a binary, you have kids or you don't have kids. You want kids or you don't. And it's not as simple as that. Yeah. For some people,
black or white.
For me, it's not been. So I just am like, each to their own. That's literally it. And I'm like, anyone who gives me shit, I will tear them down. And I end up feeling like an idiot. But I'm like, if you're going to be so disrespectful and so archaic to shame me as a woman because I don't feel called to be a mother, then you're fucking ridiculous yourself, quite frankly. That I am quite stern about it, because also it takes a village to raise a kid. Like, kids it's mum and dad are not the only people in it. And actually I love being a support for my friends who are mums, because it is really hard. It's hard to be a dad as well. It's fucking hard to be a mum. Let's be honest, the world does not support mothers, and I see my friends going through such a hard time. I'm like, I love that I can support them and I can support the kid, and then I can go and have my lovely freedom. It works really well for everyone.
To be fair, I relate to it so much. I mean, I grew up in very much that, but I always say, like, people find it weird because it sounds like I wasn't looked after. I well and truly was. I was passed around like a hot potato when I was younger. Yeah. But that also meant that I suppose that's made me the social butterfly that I am today. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like my niece is like that, and she's so cool and so chilled out because of it. Like, I think that's what it's like, you know, back in the day, that's how it was. The child, it wasn't just this pressure on the mum to stay at home and bring this child up while the dad's at work, which is just a lot of pressure. It's like everyone shared, and the kids will grow up together, and it was so much healthier that way. So that's and that's what we've really created where me and my husband live. Like, we've particularly this year, like, we've just got a real tribe here, and you know, with our niece Laren, we're just, you know, we just want her to feel really supported, and that her parents to feel supported, and it's just beautiful. It's really lovely.
It's completely true. And I'd say, I think it's kind of back to the thing. I think we're seeing a lot more of people becoming more, not tribal in the context of meaning connection with people and working together. Because I feel we've all become very selfish and very like, I want this, so I'm going to do this. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then also you've got to help out where you can to an extent. Yeah,
completely.
But last but not least, I'm going to ask you the question that I ask every guest at the end of every episode. And as I said to you at the beginning, you can take this in any direction you like. But what is one piece of politically correctness that you really strongly disagree with or agree with?
I think it's that last thing there. I didn't know what I was going to say. I'm like, let's just see what comes out. I think just the whole thing around how we speak to women in particular about having kids, just like, fuck off. Just know, like, it just have some respect. It's a really personal thing. You don't know what someone's been through or is going through around the idea of having kids. And so just mind your own fucking business. And like, if that person volunteers the information and wants to talk about it, then by all means go into a conversation. But just to ask a woman, when are you having kids, or do you want kids? Why not? And then to shame them if they don't, or shame them if they do, whatever. It's just shut the fuck up. Like, I really feel strongly about that.
Yeah.
And let's just be more accepting of people's different life choices, and more respectful of the fact that we don't know what someone is going through. We don't know someone's situation. So be more compassionate and just a bit more respectful. Yeah.
I completely agree, 100% there. It's, as I say, not something I've gone through, but something my older sister's gone through. So I completely relate to it. Just let people, as I say, it's that whole thing of just let people be what they want to be, and then think that's something that everyone goes on about that we should do, but we're not actually doing. So please, people, actually do it. Don't be a pain in the arse. But thank you so much for coming on. It's been a really, really interesting episode and a really interesting conversation. I've learnt so much, and I know there's a lot we agreed on and a lot we connected on, but I have certainly learnt a lot as well. So thank you so much for coming on. Of course, I will link Persia's stuff below if you want to check her out or get in contact. I will leave everything below for you to check out. And thanks again.
Thank you. I've loved it.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Not Quite Podcast. Please make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram to get regular updates about the podcast.